Hello everyone, welcome to another podcast with myself, Paul Riley, for our gym instructing level 2 qual. As you can see, today we're going to cover the muscular system, which is part of the anatomy and physiology unit of the qualification. Alright, so today as you can see also we've got lesson A and lesson B, which is part of this. Basically you don't have to worry about that, it's just going to be one big lesson, just the way it's broken down within the qualification. So first and foremost, we'll cover our learning outcomes for today. So the main aim is to understand the muscular system and the assessment criteria which you should be clear on at the end of lesson A is you should be able to identify the three types of muscle tissue, should be able to define the characteristics and functions of the three types of muscle, should be able to describe the basic structure of the skeletal muscle, should be able to name and locate the anterior skeletal muscles along with the posterior skeletal muscles. That's just a posh word for front and back. Describe the structure and the function of the pelvic floor muscles. Describe the different types of muscle action. Identify the joint actions brought about by specific muscle groups. And finally, identify skeletal muscle fiber types and their characteristics. So lesson A. First of all, again, as with all these presentations I do, whether it's done on a visit or whether it's done on a podcast such as this, just pause this section and just write down what you think you know or what you think, a muscle is, okay? All right, so if you just pause it here, just answer that and then carry on. So we have a variety of different types of muscle tissue. There's three main types basically, okay? We've got our smooth muscle, which is primarily found within the digestive system. There are elements found in the reproductive organs as well. We have our cardiac muscle, also known as myocardium, which is exclusively found in the heart, given its name, cardiac muscle. And then the vast majority of muscles within the body, and the type of muscles that you often associate with the word muscle, are skeletal muscles. Okay, they are striated, which we'll go into later. Examples of that would be things like the hamstrings and the triceps. So the smooth muscle, which you said obviously was found in the digestive system and a few of the areas of the reproductive system, are controlled by the autonomic nervous system. Okay, that means they're not under our conscious control. They are controlled by certain aspects of certain parts of the brain which don't require our conscious control. Alright, so given that they are involuntary, so we don't choose to use them. They're just always working in the background, basically. As we've already said, they're found in the digestive system, blood vessels as well, such as in the arteries. The muscle lining of the arteries is a good example of where you can find some smooth muscle. In the urinary system, okay, to push urine out of the bladder, and so also in the reproductive system, as I said before. Basically, all of them are used in a process that maintain the body's internal environment, okay, the homeostatic state of the body, to make sure that everything's working the way it should be and to keep the balance of the internal environment. An example of this would be the muscles of the digestive tract contract to move food through the body. Okay, so obviously the food enters the stomach. That's in itself has a large kind of muscle lining that massages the food around, helps break it down, but also helps it obviously pass through and transit through the small intestine, the large intestine, and obviously ultimately out of the body. Okay, moving on to the cardiac muscle. Again, it's found in the heart, okay, the chamber walls. The main function is to pump blood around the body. As we know, that's the main function of the heart, and therefore the main function of the cardiac muscle. It's always working. Okay, it continuously works. It never stops, never has a day off. Okay, from the moment you're born, well, before you're born, while you're a fetus obviously in the womb, up until the day when it stops beating, it never stops. Okay, again, that is involuntary. It's not under your conscious control. You don't have to tell your heart to beat to keep going, which is obviously a good job. Some of us will probably forget. And the contraction of the heart is a bit more technical, this part. The contraction of the heart is controlled by the sanatorial node, otherwise known as SAN. Moving on to the skeletal muscle, again, which is obviously the most common muscle within the body and the muscle that people associate with kind of building muscle. Skeletal muscle is striated. What that means is it's got a linear pattern on it. Okay, so it's got the appearance of having lines down the length of it, basically. Okay, so that's its appearance. It attaches to bones across joints via tendons. Okay, so we've mentioned this in previous lessons. Tendons connect, obviously, muscles to bones. Controlled by the somatic nervous system, all right, which means that we're conscious of moving our muscles. So obviously, if we want to pick up a cup to take a drink from, or if we want to lift a weight, then we consciously, we make that movement happen. Okay, you might not think that you sit there and think, right, I'm going to lift that now. You don't think it. You think, right, lift that. It's done faster than that, obviously, but you're still in control of it. If you want to do something, unless you have obviously a serious health issue, you can just control your body to do that. So it's under your voluntary control. That's really important. In the paper that obviously we are preparing for, that that classification will be in there. You'll have to talk about skeletal muscle being voluntary, and obviously cardiac and smooth muscle being involuntary. So skeletal muscles contract and pull on the bones to produce locomotion and movement. So the whole reason that we can move, well, partly the reason is due to muscles. Okay, obviously we need the skeletal system there as well, but the two work together. So the muscles pull on the bones in order to create movement, locomotion. Obviously that's just us obviously in the process of moving. They resist the force of gravity. All right, if we didn't have the muscles within the body, then we would just collapse to the floor. Basically, they help maintain posture, which means obviously body alignment and keep us upright. And stop, obviously, the force of gravity overcoming us. Now, the characteristics of muscle tissue, there's elasticity, which gives it the ability to stretch and recoil to its original shape. So obviously, if you're lifting weights, you are shortening and lengthening muscles, but they ultimately can go back to their original shape. Alongside that, obviously, as I just said, contractility, basically they can contract, extendability, they can lengthen. Electrical excitability, right, it's an interesting word for you there. The ability to respond to an electrical stimulus. Okay, obviously our brain sends out mild electrical stimuluses, which is what ultimately controls our muscles. But if you were to apply an electrical current to any part of the body, you would see either a spasm or a jolt, and that's because obviously muscles respond to electrical excitability. All right, your next task, where you can pause now, will be to use individual post-it notes or sticky labels to write down the name of each skeletal muscle you know. Okay, for example, you could use the biceps, triceps, deltoids, muscles like that. Stick the label either on yourself or if you're with anyone now, on your peers to show the position of where you think that muscle may be. Okay, it's just going to let you know, obviously, what you know already. Okay. So we've got anterior muscles coming up. All anterior means is the front view of something, okay? So anterior means front view. As you can see there, you've got a variety of muscles. The first of which we're looking at is the pectoralis major, which obviously commonly is known as the pecs, but you need to get into the habit of calling it by its proper anatomical name. So the pecs are pectoralis major. You've got the biceps there, okay, but its proper name is biceps brachii. You've got the rectus abdominalis, okay, which is obviously normally known as the abs, so rectus abdominis. You've got the deltoids, obviously, which are located in the shoulders. You'd use those obviously in things such as shoulder press. You've got the internal obliques. All right, if you've ever done a gym session where you've done Russian twists, you are obviously strengthening your core muscles, or the part of your core muscles, and as you can see, they are found just to the side, with the left and the right of the rectus abdominis. Moving down to the legs, you've got the quadriceps. Obviously, it's a very common muscle, but most people obviously understand where that is. It's quite a strong muscle. You've got your adductors, which are right on the inside of both legs. Okay, you have them on both legs. You've got the tibialis anterior. Okay, so that's the muscle that goes obviously over the front of the tibia. That's obviously given its name. Tibialis anterior, that means at the front of the tibia. Then you've got the external obliques, all right, which are a little bit lower than the internal. Again, in layman's terms, if you often referred to as where your V lines are in your body, they obviously highlight where the external obliques are within the body. You've got the upper upper trapezius, which, as you can see, is the muscle that looks like it joins obviously the shoulder to the neck. Okay, it's quite a powerful muscle. Okay, it's involved a lot in your posture. Moving on from there, got the iliopsoas. Okay, muscle there where that is. Okay, all these muscles which I'm going through now, again, you just need to have a general working knowledge of obviously of where they are. You may be asked to label a few of these on your paper. I'd be very surprised if you had to label all of them, but there may be a selection which is asking you to, which it may ask you to label. So just make sure that you are au fait with these. A lot of them you may know, obviously from the past, but these will be important. Now moving on to the posterior muscles. Again, as you can see from the picture, that just means the back of posterior means the back of something. Okay, so your posterior muscles, which we're going to go through here. Again, you can pause these throughout this podcast and you can note them down. You can re-watch just to make sure that you can get as much kind of research and knowledge based soaked up into your memory to make sure that when it comes to the paper you can obviously then answer the questions which are on there. So you've got the latissimus dorsi, which obviously is the area towards the lower back there, large muscle. Gluteus maximus, very powerful muscle found, obviously, layman's terms, in the bum. You've got the hamstrings, which are obviously they work in the antagonist of the quadriceps. Okay, so they work in pairs basically. You've got the gastrocnemius, which is one part of the calf muscle. The soleus, which is the other part. You've got the tricep brachii, which obviously is the antagonist of the bicep brachii. You've got the hip abductors on the outside. You've got the trapezius at the back of the neck. You've got the rhomboids, which run just lower than the trapezius. You've got the erector spinae, which is towards the base of the spine, the muscles there. Basically, you can see within the picture the white parts there are basically the tendons, major tendons. So as you can see where that's pointing, that's basically the southernmost muscle within the back, basically. Now, if we were to cut a muscle in half, what would we see? Well, you can see the structure in front of you there. Okay, so if we look at the furthest right, okay, you've got the tendon, all right? So the tendon attaches the muscle to the bone, okay? It's a very tough tissue which does that, okay? Obviously, if you have a muscle pulling against that, it's got to be able to withstand that and also remain anchored at the bone as well. All right, then moving down, wrapped around the muscle is the fascia or the fascia, okay? That wraps everything together, okay? It's sort of like a membrane, keeps everything nice and tidy. Then if we removed that fascia, we would have the muscle belly, okay, which is the main surface of the main muscle, as you can see there. Now, along the very top of the muscle belly, or surrounding the muscle belly, this kind of membrane, is the epimysium, okay, that surrounds the muscle belly. Then we get to the technical bit now, okay, so within there it's made up of bundles of muscle fibers, basically. Bundles and bundles that work together. Now, you have the large body, which you can see which is ringed on that picture, and that is known as the fasciolae. Okay, and what that is that's another bunch of muscle fibers. Okay, so the muscle belly itself is made up of a variety, or numerous, should I say, of the fasciolae. Okay, and then within the fasciolae, separating the fasciolae is the perimysium. That just separates all these variety of different fasciolae. Okay, within the fasciolae, we've got bundles of muscle fibers. Okay, so you've got bundles of muscle fibers within the fasciolae, and then you've got the endomysium. Okay, which is basically the bit. It's similar to the epimysium, which surrounds the large muscle belly, but the endomysium surrounds these muscle fibers. Okay, so that's what wraps up the muscle fibers, is the endomysium. And then the smallest part inside the muscle fiber, okay, where all the energy production takes place, is inside the myofibril. Okay, that's the smallest part. Okay, we got obviously lots and lots of myofibril. Inside them there's a substance called actin and myosin, and that is where energy production takes place. Okay, that's what we'll move on to in a second. So the myofibril structure, you've got basically a sarcomere which is inside the myofibril. Okay, and within there, as I just mentioned on the previous slide, you have substances known as actin and myosin. So you have a thin filament within the myofibril called the actin, and then the thicker one is the myosin. And what happens here is these fibers slide within each other, or the myosin slides within the actin, and that is what produces energy, okay, within the myofibril. And that's something we're going to look at now. So you've got something that's called the sliding filament theory. And sliding filament theory, as you've just seen it move there, you can rewind that if you didn't see that, is basically, as we said before, the myosin sliding against the actin and producing energy from the actual from the process and the mechanics of those two filaments sliding together. Okay, that is where energy is produced. I mean, I'm not going to go into too much detail onto the actual chemistry that goes on there, because it's more detail than you need to know. All you need to know is the process of the myosin sliding against the actin filament is where energy is produced. Okay. If you want to carry on doing these paired tasks, if you are with somebody, partner 1 explain the muscle structure to partner 2, and partner 2 can explain the sliding filament theory to partner 1. Okay, once you've done that, each partner can assess the other person. So you might have partner 2 with the slides in front of them for the structure of the muscles, and then partner 2 can obviously feedback on how well they've done on that section. Alright, moving on to the fast and slow twitch muscle fibers. Skeletal muscle comprises a mixture of 2 distinct fiber types, identified and classified by their contractile and metabolic characteristics. Okay, don't get scared by those terms, we're going to explain them now. So the different types that we've got of muscle fiber are slow twitch, or otherwise known as type 1. And then you've got fast twitch, otherwise known as type 2A or B. And the characteristics which you've got there, you've got type 1 fibers are slow twitch. Okay, so they have a very good blood supply, so that gives them a very deep red colour, because they have a lot of capillaries in there. A great blood supply gives them a deep red appearance. Okay, these fibers are primarily used for aerobic activities. So that is obviously activities where oxygen is present. Activities, again, an example of those would be a marathon runner, long distance swimmer, triathlete, Tour de France cyclist, things like that. Okay, those sort of athletes would predominantly want to have a high proportion of type 1 slow twitch fibers. Okay, there's lower force produced from them, so they're not an explosive muscle fiber, but they can obviously go on and on and on, and they fatigue slowly. So again, with those characteristics, you can see why they're so important to an endurance or an aerobic athlete. Moving on from there, the other end of the spectrum is your type 2B fast twitch fibers. Okay, so you've got basically they've got a poor blood supply because they're working anaerobically. All right, but they're very explosive. They've got a very explosive power there. So sprinters, anything like sprinters at all, or anyone doing a high jump or long jump where you want that explosive sort of muscle force production. That's what athletes in that area are going to want, predominantly fast twitch type 2 muscle fibers within there. Okay, they're quick to fatigue though. That's one of the major drawbacks to it. As you see with sprinters, if you're 100-meter sprinter was to go all out for 400 meters, they might be able to get to 400 meters, but anywhere after that, they're not going to they're not going to be performing to any decent level, okay, because obviously there's not a good blood supply there. That will have run out. Oxygen supply will have run out as well because it's anaerobic. So that is the reason why, obviously, they will be quick to fatigue. All right. Now, your type 2A fibres, which are intermediate in between, can be tailored and, adapted dependent upon training. Okay. So that means, for example, if you had a Tour de France cyclist who obviously would do a lot of training, they would have a certain amount of type 1 slow twitch fibres anyway. Okay. You can't change them. You've got a certain amount of them, and you're stuck with them. Okay. But type 2A fibres can be adapted. So the Tour de France cyclist, through lots and lots of training, would alter their type 2A fibres to be more to share a lot of characteristics of type 1A to type 1 fibres. All right, and then obviously the predominant fibres within their muscles then would be towards type 1 slow fibres, therefore increasing their endurance and increasing the blood supply to the muscle in general. Alternatively, type 2B athletes, so fast twitch athletes who want to be good at sprinting or explosive exercise such as long jumping, they would obviously train in those specific areas, and they could train their type 2A fibres to then change to be very much like the type 2B fast twitch, and therefore obviously giving them more speed, more explosiveness, and also giving them obviously a better performance. Thought storm. Name an athletic event where mainly slow twitch muscle fibres would be used. Now, I've just said that in the previous bit, but if you want to put that down, put it down. Paired tasks. Now, so this is preempting the next section, which we're going to be going on to. Where would you locate the pelvic floor muscles? Okay. And then also, what would be a function of the pelvic floor muscles? Now, this is important. If you give yourself 30 seconds to just jot down what you think that is before you move on, that's great. All right. So pelvic floor muscles comprise of a small group of muscles and are associated connective tissue which span the area underneath the pelvis. So as you can see in that picture there, you've got your pelvic girdle, and then the bit, so the area directly below that is full of connective tissue and smaller muscles known as the pelvic floor muscles. Okay, and their function is to provide support for the pelvic organs, such as the bladder and the intestines. Really, they're the organs which they're supporting. Also, they can prevent stress incontinence. Now, what that means is stress incontinence is if you're stressed, obviously, or if you press on the abdominal area of your body, you would then start to urinate. Basically, these stop that from happening, so they're really useful. Okay, they keep all your urine where it's supposed to be. They can also facilitate birth by resisting the descent of the presenting baby. Okay, so they would stop the baby basically, for all intents and purposes, falling out. All right, they keep it in there, and they can aid or slow down, the birthing process. Although during the birthing process they can be severely damaged, which can then lead, obviously, after the pregnancy, can lead to females experiencing things like stress incontinence. Although the pelvic muscles can be retrained afterwards and can be strengthened to help reduce the amount of stress incontinence. And they also form the lower part of the inner unit there, as you can see. They sort of just keep everything nice and tidy and closed in. Alright, got a quiz there. I'm not going to read through the questions, obviously it's a waste of time, but if you read through those questions and try and answer them all, you might be able to answer some and not others. The ones you can't answer, go back and obviously just recap the areas that you're not too au fait with. Okay. Learning review. You should now be able to identify the 3 types of muscle tissue. You should be able to define the characteristics and functions of the 3 types of muscle. You should be able to describe the basic structure of the skeletal muscle. You should be able to name and locate the anterior skeletal muscles. That might take a little bit longer. You should be able to name, obviously, the posterior skeletal muscles and locate them as well. Again, really good if you just rewind back to what we went through before if you're not too sure. You should be able to describe the structure and function of the pelvic floor muscles, and you should be able to identify should be able to identify skeletal muscle fiber types and their characteristics. Okay, if you're not, go and revisit it. Okay, you've got me obviously talking through each one of those slides again. There's not going to be anything that turns up in the test that's not in those slides, so it's really useful if you go back and maybe just watch it once or twice. I know you've got to put up with my voice obviously, but if you go through there, it's going to give you all the information you need for the exam. All right. Now, again, immediately moving on to lesson B. It's going to link into what we've just been through then as well. So stick with it. This shouldn't take as long as the last part. Okay. Learning outcomes here, as you can see, there's less learning outcomes. So by the end of this lesson B, you should be able to name and locate anterior skeletal muscles, name and locate posterior skeletal muscles, describe the different types of muscle action, identify the joint actions brought about by specific muscle groups. Okay, so we're going to go over those just now. So you've got a trio task here. Select any muscle, anterior or posterior. Each trio to have a different muscle. Okay. So basically what he's saying now is, if you want to try and label these yourself before I go on, then pause this now and try and label as many muscles as you possibly can. Alright, so pause it now. Moving on from there, all I'm going to do is just put these back in. We've been through these in the previous lesson, just gone, lesson A. So I'm not going to go through these. These are just to see what you know. Sorry, if you pause it on this one as well. If you want to go through, I'll give you one there and you can label the rest. Okay, pause it now. Alright, so the answers are, you should be getting quite a few of these now, guys. Alright, key principles of skeletal muscle work. Alright, so skeletal muscles have a start and end point. Alright, sounds obvious, but again, just need to reiterate that to you. This start and end point are known as the origin and insertion. Okay, cross joints and attach. Sorry, I'll start again. So the muscles cross joints and attach to bones. Okay, to create levers. All right, so your arms are perfect levers. Obviously, from your elbow down is a lever, is one lever, and then from your shoulder to your elbow, or even from your shoulder to your hand as well, is another lever. They have the ability to contract and pull on bones to bring about specific joint actions to align the position of the body. So they can shorten, they can lengthen, they can also exert force with no movement. So imagine you pushing against a wall. Okay, you're exerting a force against that wall, but there's no change in the muscle length. Another good thing about the muscles as well is that they can work in pairs. As one muscle contracts, which will be the prime mover, the opposite muscle can relax. All right, so if you've got the bicep and you're doing a bicep curl, the bicep is contracting, and the tricep, which is obviously its pair, its antagonist, will be relaxing. Okay, origins and insertions. Skeletal muscles have recognizable ends fixed via tendons onto bones. Okay, so the origin, the attachment point of a muscle remains relatively fixed during muscular contraction. Okay, so your origin for a bicep curl would be up towards the shoulder. Okay, muscular attachment nearest to the midline of the trunk. Okay, then the insertion, the attachment point of the muscle that moves most during the muscular contraction. Okay, so for your bicep curl again, your insertion would be towards the elbow. Okay, or in the elbow sort of area, in the elbow pouch basically. Muscular attachment furthest from the midline of the trunk. Your trio task there for your selected muscle, name the joints crossed, locate the origin and insertion for the muscles which you chose before. Now we've got a variety of muscle contractions. Okay, we have got concentric, which is positive. Okay, the muscle generates enough force to overcome gravity and lift the resistance while its fibers are shortening. Again, perfect example of that would be a bicep curl, which is what you're seeing the young lady doing on the right hand side of your screen there. Okay, so that's a concentric contraction. You've got eccentric contraction, all right, which would be the downward movement of what you've seen above there. So as you can see in that picture there, as the lady releases or brings down the weight, Okay, the biceps they're still working. All right, they're still having to generate force, but it's eccentric. Okay, it's as the muscle is lengthening, so it's still being used. So it's not, the biceps not just being used on the upward stroke. Okay, so with the concentric movement, it's also being used in an eccentric movement as well. And then you've got isometric. Okay, which is static movement. So as I said before, you could use the example of pushing against the wall, or as they've used down there on this PowerPoint, the example of a plank. Okay, so there's the force being exerted there during a plank. The muscle generates force to control the resistance while its fibers remain the same length. All right, so nothing's contracting, nothing's going concentric, sorry, and nothing is eccentric either. There's no movement, but there's still a force being generated, okay, which is to control the resistance, and that is known as isometric or static. Roles of the muscles, okay, you've got prime movers or agonists, meaning the leader, okay, so obviously, the muscle that's driving the desired action, okay, so the prime mover for a bicep curl would be obviously the bicep brachii. Okay, now just a confusion there. The movement which I was talking about is not the movement that's going on with the young lady there. Okay, so obviously the movement she's doing there is she's bent over and she's pulling up the weight which is in her hand there. Because of the angle that she's at, yeah, the prime mover would be the tricep brachii. Okay, the antagonist, meaning opponent of the muscle, drives the opposite direction to the agonist, would be the bicep brachii there, okay? As the tricep brachii lengthens, the bicep would shorten, and as the bicep shortens, the tricep would lengthen, okay? You've got the synergist, meaning working together, a muscle that aids or modifies agonist movement, okay? In this case, it's posterior deltoid at the top, so that's aiding, okay? That's helping aid the movement of the weight that's being moved, okay? But it's not directly responsible for the movement. It's just helping, okay? A synergist is something that helps something along. Okay, then you've got a fixator, and as the name suggests, meaning to fasten, okay? So it's a muscle that stabilizes and locks down movement at another joint to promote effective movement of the agonist, okay? In this case, the upper trapezius, okay? If that wasn't there, obviously there could be a roll, maybe, of the body, and it basically just makes sure everything stays stable apart from the areas that you want to move. So obviously the major area that is being moved there is the arm, okay? So that stops any other part of the body or any other part of the body close to the movement moving. So it fixates, it fastens down other joints, basically. Okay, another task for your selected muscle: find an exercise where this muscle contracts and works as a prime mover or agonist. Name the antagonist muscle. Describe the concentric and eccentric movement phase of the exercise selected. Okay, so pause it there and you can start to conduct those trio tasks. Alright, quick quiz. I'll read through this for you. Name the muscles that contract concentrically to bring about the following joint actions. Okay, so what muscles are contracting to bring about those bullet pointed joint actions there? Okay, basically, what is the prime mover there in all of those? Pause that there, come up with the answers. Okay guys, we got to the end of that now. You don't have to listen to me waffling on anymore. So you've got the assessment criteria. You should now be able to name and locate anterior skeletal muscles. Obviously that's been an ongoing process from lesson A as well. You've got name and locate posterior muscles. They are key. You need to make sure that you've got those locked down, okay? So if you're not sure about them, go over them again over the next few weeks. Our exam for this isn't until the end of September, so just make sure you get those locked down. You need to be able to describe the different types of muscle action and identify the joint actions brought about by specific muscle groups. Okay, and that is us done there, guys. If you have any further questions or anything like that, please contact me. Again, as I've said, we have got our exam at the end of September. I've not set a proper date for it yet. I will keep you updated with that. Again, also these lessons which I'm doing on the podcast, which I'm submitting here. Again, I will be coming to do visits to underpin more knowledge. You can ask me questions there, and then if you don't want to email me or ring me. Obviously, everything you've looked at on this podcast now is to be used in conjunction with any handouts I've given you in the past, and more importantly, to be used with your resource pack, which is with your, obviously your gym instructing main pack itself. Okay, so if you're not sure about anything, before you ask me, try and research it yourself. Go through your research pack, look through the anatomy and physiology aspect of it, and really, really kind of marry the two up, and you should be fine there. Okay, if you're still at odds of what you're not sure what certain things mean, or you're not sure of anything at all, just get in touch with me either via email, via phone, or when I come in next time during our visit. All right, I'll be in touch with you guys. Thanks for listening to me there, and I will be back in touch with you in another 2 weeks. Probably come down and do a visit actually. All right, thank you very much for listening.